You're now listening to the Dear Church podcast.
Good morning. The day is Monday.
Who are you?
The day after Christmas.
Imposter.
Sam is not here for reasons unbeknownst to man. Just kidding. He is still recovering, and he is taking care
Recovering from what?
He is not recovering. His wife is recovering, but he is taking care of their newborn baby Adeline. So we wish them the very best, and that they would come back to us soon, and that we get to see baby Adeline soon in person as well. We're also praying just for Pastor Eugene as he's traveling. But yeah, it's the day after Christmas. How are your Christmases, guys?
It's such a blessing.
What was that?
This is fake.
That was good. Oh, what else are we gonna say? Huh?
Are we not gonna introduce ourselves?
Oh yeah. Well, as you guys have noticed, Sam is not hosting today. It is instead Sam's worst nightmare, Brian, and I will be hosting today's podcast episode. And joining with me today is
Christine.
Engine suck.
So we got a lot planned today, and yeah, roll the intro. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. Today, as we are approaching the new year, we'll be going over some highlights from this year. And every year, it seems like we have so much going on that I think it might be hard for us to remember just how much God has done in and through our church. And so we thought that now would be a good opportunity to look back on some of the events that we've done, or maybe even some moments that stood out to us. And so since we have June 2nd Christine with us today, we can focus on some of the things that stood out for them, and especially in their respective ministries. But before we get into that, what for you guys was your most memorable Christmas gift ever in life?
I don't have one.
Like you've
remember.
never received a memorable
No.
Christmas gift in your life?
No, I've received many wonderful, wonderful gifts. I just,
Like none of them stood out for you at all?
oh, you know what? When I was younger, I really, really, really wanted this playset. This was like when I was very young, and I really wanted this like dollhouse playset. It was very, very expensive, and my parents kept telling us, "You're probably not gonna get it this year," but then they got it for us for Christmas, and we were just so excited.
Seems very worldly. Mine's Jesus
Yeah.
Christ.
I don't know what else.
Just
to say.
kidding. I think for me, probably the most memorable one, because it's most recent memory, is Pastor Eugene got these dolls. What are they called? Tea turtles? For all the
Tea
staff.
Yeah.
Tea turtles?
Yeah,
The
they're called tea
octopus.
turtles. It's those dolls that you can flip inside out, and then there's two emotions. There's like a happy one and a sad one. Pastor Eugene got one for each of the staff members.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one.
And
Each one was a different
he-
animal, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He got me a turtle. It's kind of cute.
I got a fox.
You did not
No,
get
you-
a
you
fox.
stole
Okay,
that
you
fox from
stole that
Sam.
from Sam. What did you originally have?
I had an octopus that had tears in its eyes when it was
see.
sad.
It's because Christine cries and
Seems
often
accurate,
sometimes.
yeah.
No, I don't.
And I got a wolf. Honestly, it's pretty generic, but I feel like for a lot of guys, a memorable gift for them is when their parents got them a game console.
Mm.
And for me, it was when I first got, it's when N64 came out, like a long time ago. But I got it pretty late, so all my friends had it for a while, and I would just have to go over to their houses to play it. And then, so finally, when my parents got me N64, I think I was like super happy.
Hmm.
So, great Christmas.
Sounds
All
a
right.
little worldly, don't you think?
How dare you?
Stop taking my jokes.
But as I was saying, we're going to be going over some memories and just some of the things that happened this past year. So since we have Christine with us, if you had to choose this one, what was your favorite memory this year from Edify?
I really enjoyed a lot of things. I will say I'm gonna give 2. Is that okay? The retreat
No, it
this
is
year.
actually not okay.
That's not
Well,
the question.
That wasn't the
I'm
question.
gonna give 2. Thank you. The retreat this year was pretty amazing. Every retreat has been just so wonderful, but this retreat in particular, we had a guest come from outside of CGS, and it was Lydia Brownback. She is a seasoned speaker and very mature woman of God who we were really blessed to have come and speak. And so it was really wonderful to get to learn from her and be able to talk with her, and just, yeah, it was really, really, really wonderful. The other thing I think is the Edify hosted Nourish dinner that we did for the entire church, the Give Thanks. I think that was really fun. There was a lot of really good food. All the women really brought amazing food. And yeah, it was great to see everybody come together, share the things that they were thankful for, and just see the women really be able to feed the congregation like that. It was pretty awesome.
I can share one about Gravitas. I think since Gravitas is a pretty new ministry, we've had a lot of thought or we've continually been brainstorming about which events to do. And since we've been going over this book recently called The Masculine Mandate, one of the things we want to do is see how men are called to live out their lives as God's image bearers in different contexts, one in the church, the family, at work, and things like that. And so for one of the months, we did how men are supposed to serve the church. And we actually we put together kind of a makeshift restaurant for the sisters of our church.
Yeah, it was pretty
And
cool.
so it was funny because a lot of the guys had to kind of put on like waiter personas, and they had to be really professional. And even the food and everything like that, we paid a lot of attention to it. And so I think it was it was a fun event, but I think at the same time, it really put our men in a mindset to really serve the church. And it was a little bit out of our comfort zone, but I think it really turned out well.
Yeah, it did. It was really sweet. And I think being on the receiving end of that too was really awesome to see the men doing that and setting an example of what it looks like to serve the church in that kind of way, being able to cook and serve, like actually wait tables and that sort of thing. So I thought it was a good, even example for the women to see and to be able to follow. And it was cool.
Yeah, I thought just to add on, I thought the response was kind of awesome too. I think a lot of the ladies, I think when we see men serving women in society, a lot of what society shows us is the response is like, as they should, right? But I think it was very gracious of the ladies to, in receiving that, like Christine said, I think their response was, oh, we should do this for the men. We should do this for others at church too. And it led to even a bigger dinner with what Christine mentioned before, the Give Thanks dinner. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was very thankful.
Was there a dish that stood out to you guys?
Dude, the food was all so like it was really amazing. It was, for those who weren't there, it was like fine dining experience. The meal was like a 5-course meal prepared by Danny Park and a couple of the guys that worked together as the cooking team, and they were here all day working on it. And everything was so good. They even had like a palate cleanser, which was, what was it, sherbet? Some kind of sherbet?
I think it was sorbet.
Sorbet.
It's like the same
sorbet,
thing, though.
yeah. They didn't
It's not just ice cream.
They didn't make it, but that was like, even that was like thoughtful. But my
So
favorite
your favorite
thing.
one was the one that they didn't
Yeah,
make.
we bought that one.
No, I'm just saying that was really thoughtful, is what I'm saying. They like really went above and beyond. But I thought my favorite thing was probably the pasta.
The miso pasta.
It was
right?
so unique. I've never had something like that before. It was excellent.
That was a crazy one to cook.
Yeah, I don't know how they did it without fire.
They use fire.
They use
Oh, they
fire.
did?
They definitely use fire.
I thought they just soaked the noodles and then
No,
it became
we-
like
we
They
noodles.
had
Yeah.
like burners.
Oh,
Yeah, we had a lot of burners.
I mean, anyway, it was
Yeah.
still really good. I think someone at our table asked for seconds of that too, in particular.
Thank you guys. In terms of our respective ministries, Junks, you can jump into this one too with the college and your college ministry and anything else you serve in. But was there anything, I guess, at the beginning of the year that you guys wanted to accomplish with your ministries? And how do you think it progressed throughout the year? Did you guys accomplish them? What do you guys think?
I think for the women, we've always had good conversations with our elders in charge. So Hoyoung in particular, as well as Pastor Eugene, always kind of giving us the directive in the beginning of the year or the end of last year to kind of continue to be able to teach on things that are relevant to women. So you mentioned earlier, Brian, that the men's ministry always is focusing on what it looks like to be a man of God according to the word of God, as opposed to what the world might tell us. So it's obviously very similar for the women. And this year we really did try to follow examples of women that we would look up to. So we looked a lot in the word to find extraordinary women in the Bible that we could learn from. Yeah, we spent a couple months doing that, and I thought that was really, really fun. And even women like Rahab, who you wouldn't necessarily immediately think of, we were able to learn from her too, and the faith that she had in recognizing that who God was. And Yeah, I think yeah, I don't know about accomplishing, but I think every year we're like continuing to grow and learn, and we're excited, especially for next year too, because I think this past year was a great stepping stone year to prepare ourselves for what's coming. And this year we're actually going to attempt to read the entire New Testament and the Book of Psalms together in 8 months. So
I think for me, just thinking about the college ministry and what we did this past year, I think over the summer we went over a program where we learned. Uh, I think we talked about this before. The means of grace, the ordinary means of grace that God gives to the church. So for our college students, who are many of them are very young, so we have a lot of freshmen, sophomores. Most of our college group is actually now freshmen, sophomores, uh, and just emphasizing the importance of biblical preaching, of the sacraments, and of prayer and fellowship, and all these things. I think it was very crucial that our college students learn this, as especially as they went into school, understanding that these are things that they should be expecting from the churches that they attend, and are able to seek out to learn and grow as believers in Christ. I thought that was very helpful for our college students. And yeah,
Yeah, as I said before, Gravitas is a relatively new ministry. I think we started our first event sometime in June, so actually pretty late into the year. But at least in the 6 months we had left in the year, we wanted to get a good chunk of the masculine mandate out of the way. And so I think this year we got to focus on what it looks like to be a husband, what it looks like to serve the church. And then recently we went into a teaching about, what does it look like to work, and what does it look like to be a shepherd in, like, your context and in the church. And I think the men have been growing in that understanding slowly but surely. And similarly in I guess how the world might tell, one of the challenges for, I guess, Edify and Gravitas is we're always kind of combating what the world is telling us
Mm.
about what it looks like to be a man or what it looks like to be a woman.
Mhm.
I think there's definitely a temptation for us to kind of combat this in our ministries with this, like, or combat this in our ministries with more culture.
Mhm.
Like a man's supposed to do this, woman's supposed to do this, but rather for us, I think what we're trying our best to do is this is what the Bible says about biblical masculinity or biblical femininity.
Mhm.
And I think the book was a really good way to do that this year. And
Yeah.
I think it's going to culminate well into the men's retreat that's coming up as well, because Reverend Tim Brindle, he's speaking about God's good design.
When is that, Brian?
That is January 13 to 15. You can sign up at cgsnj.org/Gravitas Retreat 23.
Good stuff.
How about just church events in general? We had a lot of, we had a lot of all church events this year.
Mhm.
Were there any that stood out to you?
There's so many. Like I said, I'm just sitting and trying to think. I mean, we just did so many things this year.
Your Edify thing was almost like a church event, the Thanksgiving
I mean,
thing.
that it was an all church event. It was open to
Yeah.
everybody. Yeah.
No,
I
that
mean,
was a nice one.
I didn't want to bring that one up because I mentioned it already, but that was definitely a favorite for me, I think. But I'm going to say VBS, even though it technically wasn't all church, but the preparation basically takes the entire church. So our children come and they spend the week with volunteers and a lot of our children's ministry staff. And yeah, they learn about the gospel. And this year the theme was, what was it? Pirates? Was that last year?
Bro,
No.
Pirates was last
Pirates
year,
was
man.
last. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. This year the theme was knights.
Watchmen.
it's called The King is
Watchmen.
Coming.
The King is coming.
What is
Yeah.
knights?
Sorry, not knights. This year the theme was the king is coming. So it was very like medieval and like with swords and that sort of thing. But yeah, I really love watching in the weeks leading up to VBS, just everyone coming together to prepare for it. And even during, obviously, there are the teachers and the staff who are with the kids teaching, which is absolutely important. But there's also a lot of people behind the scenes, like the decorations team, like the food prep team. We had a full group of people take off a couple hours from work or even a day, or spending a little bit of time during their lunch break to come and deliver snacks, make food. I really enjoy doing that as we continue to teach our next generation.
I think BBB stood out to me this year.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I think especially because it turned out better than what I had originally planned. Because we were going to do it outside on a turf field, and it turned out that that was literally going to be the hottest day in the year.
Right.
And we were like really close to either postponing it or canceling it, and we didn't want people to get heat strokes and things like that. But I think things turned out really well because we found a gym that many of us used to go to. I think a lot of us have migrated away from that gym. There's a boxing phase that's going on in our church right now. A lot of people are getting into boxing, but that gym. At the last minute, they allowed us to use their facilities, and the facility was great. People, had a lot of fun, and it's always good to see what our church is really into. I think HIIT or like high intensity training is something that our church goes through like seasons of, right? Like we have some ladies doing like F45, that kind of stuff. Some guys were into CrossFit, not so much now, but HIIT always kind of makes like a return at some point in the year. And so it's always fun to see our church do what they love.
I think for me, every year the all church retreat always kind of stands out because it does require a lot of work from the staff members, but at the same time, not just the staff members, it's just so many people put so much work into it. But I think especially this past year, having Reverend Guy Prentice Waters come and speak on how we as Christians are able to trust in the sovereignty of God, even through the most difficult of times, studying figures in the Bible like Job or Daniel or even Paul, who was just shipwrecked and who just went through just so much hardships, and seeing how the response of these faithful people of God and how they put their trust in him and his sovereignty, I think was very helpful and applicable for a lot of us, especially considering maybe even some of the summer book studies that we were doing, living in this world, how we as Christians can respond and put our faith in Christ. I think, just the summer retreat and just like all the the events, the different activities, the fun that we had. I think there's something about going away with the church together. It's almost like a family vacation where we go and get to study and can be encouraged together. So yeah, the retreat was pretty awesome.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the book studies we did this summer too. I think our church in general, because there's other book studies going on outside of the classes as well, that we're reading so many books throughout the years that sometimes I forget which ones we actually read through. So another one is Holiness of God. We did Holiness of God with the men. And then for the summer classes, we did Spiritual Disciplines by Donald Whitney, Pastor Paul's favorite. Strange New World, Carl Truman.
Yes.
And
God versus
Government with Sam. So yeah, I almost completely forgot about those. But
Nathan
those were great.
Busenwich?
Yeah.
And James
Coates.
Yeah.
Were there any other book studies that went on, I guess maybe in college or Edify this year as well?
So Edify, actually, we used a Flourish Bible study, and we went through one of the books of the Bible. It was a very impromptu kind of like last minute thing, but a group of like 8 of us met for 10 weeks on Sunday mornings to go through the study together, and that was really fun. And it's by Lydia Brownback. Did I mention that? Yeah, that was one of the ones that we used, the Flourish study. And then I know that there are a lot of other like smaller reading groups going on. The music team also has been reading too. We finished Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment, which I know a lot of folks were reading on their own or with a friend as well. And then we started Enjoying God by R.C. Sproul. So we're still doing that.
Yeah, I mean, for the college ministry, I mentioned it before. The curriculum that we used was a book called The Essential Means of Grace by Paul Washer. It's very short, very succinct, but very helpful in understanding those topics.
So a big change that happened to our church this year is we completely switched our worship order up.
Yeah, since the first
we
week of
completely
January.
switched our liturgy up as a church. And so I'm not on praise, so I'm not, I guess in the front line of doing a lot of those changes. So for me, I think that change, from at least from a face value, that change came very natural. But I'm sure for you guys who are on praise, there were a lot of hurdles to overcome, and a lot of things to get used to. So, could you guys share a little bit about that?
There was so much. I think this year's worship order is really really wonderful. There's a lot about it that actually new people have come to our church this year, and two people actually have come up to me and shared that they can really see the intentionality in the worship order and the liturgy, and just how every element really does point you to Christ. It points you to the importance of the word and the preaching of the word, which is central to our gathering times. And yeah, so I think everything is meant to be that way, and we're doing our best to make it that way. Music is a really big part of the worship order. It's, I don't know, maybe like 30 to 40% of it. And so it does take up a big chunk of that. And so Junseok and I work with the rest of the music team, with Peter and Jubin as well, to really be our best. I think the first couple months were challenging for us because we were learning the new order, but also learning things that actually the church has traditionally done, like singing in 4 parts, or even singing these hymns that maybe we've never heard before, but the church has been singing for many, many years. So just like learning all of that was very hard. And the church was very gracious and kind of being patient with us as we figured that out. But I think we've reached a point where we are a little bit more comfortable, but we're still working on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely. I think one of the comments that I heard with the new worship order that people made was, "Why are we sitting and standing so often?"
Oh, yeah.
But I think just even thinking about that, it's an emphasis that we place on. It's not just whoever's in the front of the room
Mm-hmm.
that's giving service. It's everyone together rising and sitting and partaking in the worship of our Lord. So I think just minor changes that we might not even think too much about, I think it does play a significant role in what we're communicating, and just even the rationale behind why we worship the way that we do, especially just following the teaching that Pastor Eugene's been just and the elders have been just teaching us on the regulative principle. These are things that we see in the Bible. These are things that God has commanded, how he deems that he desires to be worshiped, and we should do as faithfully as we can to do these things.
Yeah. I think for me, at least, like I said, I know I'm not in the forefront of doing like all the technical and administrative stuff with the worship, but at least for me, I think one thing I've noticed is that there's definitely a difference now. Not that there wasn't before, but there's more of a difference now from the outside of the sanctuary and the inside of the sanctuary. Something as small as that. And I think R.C. Sproul talks a little bit about even how architecture in churches is made so it seems like when you walk into the church, it's a threshold, right? You're walking into the presence of God. And so even from things like the prelude, when you come in, we hope that you're able to prepare your heart for worship rather than just going out from the crazy outside and just jumping straight into it. And then, just the acts of reverence that we kind of display throughout the liturgy. I think that was not just a great change for us personally, but more also like it's teaching people the kind of right attitude to have when we're worshiping. So. So at the same time that we switched up the worship order, we actually started a new series as well. Last year, the previous year, we did First Corinthians, and we went through that for over a year. And then now, this year, we went into First Samuel. And so First Samuel, I think, was it was a big change for us, right?
Yeah.
Going from epistle to now a narrative, Old Testament narrative. So what were some of the things that stood out to you guys, whether personally for you or even just discussions in your smaller groups? What were some things that were good this year?
I think there was a lot. On the podcast, even, we answered some really interesting questions about the Witch of Endor. We answered questions about the salvation of Saul. But I think personally for me, reflecting on the sermon series, it's just pretty amazing how precise everything is, how everything is so planned. Even learning about how David would flee to the Moabites and how that points back to David's lineage, going back to the book of Ruth, which ends with the lineage of David going from what's the dude's name? Boaz to Obed to Jesse to
Yeah, that was
David.
really good.
I think just even seeing how especially seeing how intentional God is in planning all these things, ultimately leading to David's line being the line of the Messiah that is to come, Jesus Christ. I think it was pretty fascinating to and very challenging for me to see the intentionality that God puts into his just redemptive history, but not only that, all of his creation.
Yeah, that's really good. I would say, in addition to that, something that I talked about a lot with my smaller group, and we talked about in our staff meetings too, in our review of the sermons, was I think I was just struck by again and again just the difference between those who put their trust in God and those who put their trust in themselves. I think that's like ultimately what obviously sets God's children apart from everyone else. But, someone like King David and Saul were both very, like, I don't know, just if you look at their resume, they were quite, like, charismatic people. Well, actually, I guess David, not necessarily. Like, you wouldn't necessarily have thought he was initially, but, the whole thing of, like, them being very tall and, like, handsome and
Beautiful.
all these things,
Yeah.
right? Like, in that respect, you would think, okay, like, these men have a lot going for them or whatever. And then even when like King Saul is in his position, there was a lot that he had, but all of those things came from God. Like, God was the one who put him there, and it was also God who removed him, and God who put David in his place. And ultimately seeing, even throughout the entire book of 1 Samuel, how Saul would continually eventually, like, just forget to trust in God, even after all the things that he has seen. And even when he was given chances to turn, he never did, and he always trusted in his own self. Whereas David, even when there were opportunities for him to kill Saul, he still trusted in the Lord's plan, and so he wouldn't do anything until the Lord would give him, a very clear instruction to do this or to do that. And so I think that kind of trust really made me personally think I would step back, and it made me pause, like, do I have that kind of trust in the Lord? Even in circumstances where, like, it almost seems like it would make sense for me to act on something. It just seems so obvious. Like when Saul was in the cave and he was very, very vulnerable, and David could have literally just killed him there, and it would have made so much sense to do that in that circumstance. But yeah, David was not working according to his own logic and wisdom. He was really waiting on the Lord. So, and he trusted in God to lead him in the right way.
We went through a lot of current events this year on our podcast. We had a whole current events section. Any big ones that stood out to you guys this year?
What was this year? Balenciaga.
Balenciaga.
gosh,
We had
that was a big
the
one.
Disrespect for Marriage Act.
Yeah, Respect for Marriage Act.
Ro-
Those are
the
very
Roe v.
recent
Wade.
ones.
Roe v. Wade was huge.
Roe v. Wade was a big one. Did Will Smith slap Chris Rock? this
Yo,
year?
Will Smith slapped Chris Rock this year.
There was
Oh,
also
man. You really
like the
found
whole
out.
stuff with like Trump and the FBI.
Oh, the Mar-a-Lago.
Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, there was just so much stuff, like FTX.
I think for me, Roe v. Wade was the biggest one.
That was pretty big.
I think it's rough now that everything is immediately taken to like Insta stories and like, tweetable little Twitter kind of like fact checks and things like that. And then we aren't able to have actual honest discussions about it. Or it was rough for me to see, like, I guess the younger generation, I guess swayed by a lot of, whether it was influencers, whether it was just small little Insta stories on why abortion is like a woman's right on Instagram or even like TikTok and things like that. And so I think we've really resorted to these kind of like 5-second clips, 5-second like gotcha clips of, why you should be this or that. And I think it was pretty disheartening to see. But we praise God that it was overturned. And I think it's just a constant reminder for us that the sanctity of life is something that we as a church should preserve and protect. And it's almost crazy that we have to say this now, right? That an unborn baby has the right to live, and that we as parents and we as a church and we as a society need to protect those who are defenseless.
I think the Balenciaga thing was huge for me too. just because I don't know, man. The more you look into it, and I know, like, it's just not okay what was happening. And even if they try to say it was oversight and they like one person came up with a bad campaign, even if that were true, which it's absolutely not because we know how the industry works, but even if that were true, it's still a terrible thing. And I'm glad that it brought to light the many dangers that our children are facing in that industry. But just in general, I think it kind of shed a little bit of light on a very dark thing that's going on. Yeah, it's really, really disheartening, I think.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of political stuff, and even we're not here to be political for politics' sake, but for us to deal with these issues of politics and shedding light on how we as followers of Christ can react to these things, I thought was just helpful in all these things. And whether it's tragedies, I think we saw tragedies this past year, like Uvalde shooting or worldview deterioration, like all this stuff happening in the news with the Equality for Marriage Act. And just considering all these things from a biblical standpoint, I thought was very helpful for me, thinking about how we as Christians can react to these things. So, I mean, like you guys said, there was just so much that happened this year, but I think ultimately the point that kind of stood out for me was we look to God, we trust in God. It doesn't mean we're not involved, but we need to act as followers of Christ more than any political affiliation we might have. So, yeah.
Thank you, guys. And how about you guys personally? Any challenges you might have faced personally this year?
I almost died.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness.
That was
that was probably the scariest. That was one of the
I have
scarier
no
things
words.
this
How
year.
come this happens to people in our staff?
Yeah.
Pastor
I think there was
Eugene.
just a lot of things
Sure.
that happened that tested a lot of the staff members this year. And for
Yeah.
our listeners that may not know, I think I shared it on, maybe not on the podcast.
We prayed for it on during AM Pre.
Yeah. I was in a pretty serious car accident this year, but I think just kind of coming out of it and reflecting on just even the gift of being able to be alive and serve God in the current place that I'm in. I think it was a very challenging time, but a very fruitful time of reflecting and learning and growing for me. And I think for me, it was probably one of the big crises of my life where I was not questioning my faith, but I really had to put my faith into action and trusting in God even through that tragedy. So,
yeah, we are very happy that you came out of that well and are healthy today.
Yes.
And that you recovered well.
Definitely.
Yeah. I really think you probably would have been the only person who could have taken that car accident as well as
Yeah,
you
didn't
did.
you like rip the door off and
no,
Yeah, apparently
there's a lot of like myths going around about this car accident.
I heard you became like superhuman after this.
Yeah.
No.
Junks ripped the car door off.
Yeah, and then the car exploded
Yeah,
behind him.
and then behind him, he didn't even look back.
And then the wind blew through his hair as he walked away, unscathed.
Nope. I was very scathed,
Very scathed.
but I'm very grateful to be here.
Yeah, praise God for saving your life. For me,
Half marathon was a challenge.
it really was.
My
And
hip
I
hurt.
injured myself a couple weeks before that. Hey, I actually did injure my hip before that. Thankfully, it's not a serious injury, but it did bother me during the race too, and then for a couple weeks after that. So, but yeah, we did do a training actually for it was almost 3 months. A group of us, and we ran our own half marathon at Overpeck Park, and a bunch of people came out and handed us water and cheered us on. That was fun. That was a challenge for sure.
was very impressive to watch. I was just watching them from the side.
It was very cold that day
I
too.
was
Yeah.
impressed
Yeah.
by everybody else too.
Yeah, everyone finished.
They were so
13.1
Yeah.
miles.
good. Yeah.
James had a nice Insta story or Insta post
Yeah.
where he kind of recorded himself at each mile, and there was another brother that was with James in the first half of the video, and then halfway through the video,
You don't see him
he
anymore?
just disappears. So
I will say
James-
though, everyone made like excellent time though,
Mm.
really. So it was very, very encouraging to see people do that. I mean, I will say just in terms of like a difficulty, I think multiple times this year I had to take a step back and ask myself if I was content and if there was a bitter seed in my heart for different reasons, like I don't know, things that I was praying for that maybe weren't coming to fruition, or I don't know, being impatient, not waiting on the Lord, that sort of thing. And I think thankfully God has really worked that out of me this year. But that was something I thought about a lot. Discontentment. It was something I thought about a lot. Yeah, so I'm very, 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 very thankful that it's something that God has revealed to me was brewing in my heart. And I think it's still something I'm working through, but yeah, it's something I'm aware of. And like I said, I'm very grateful that God has given me much to be thankful for. And so he's even helped me to shift my mindset to realize what I have right now in this season is not a mistake. And truly, it is a gift of God, the things that I am enjoying in this season. So yeah, I say contentment is a huge thing that I thought about this year.
I think one of the things like I had to struggle a lot with was just not receiving necessarily the answer to the question, God, why did you allow this to happen? But in many ways, like Jeremiah, like Job, the question wasn't why is this happening, but the question is, who is the one who has all these things in control, right? And in the Bible, you see many times that people who ask those questions, why is this happening? They're met not with an answer of the direct answer of their question, but they're met simply with God's presence. And whether that's a presence of, hey, like, I am the all-powerful God, I know what I'm doing, or just this presence of comfort. I think both of those are things that I've experienced this year. Times where I just had to shut up because God knows better, and times also where I knew exactly that God was with me in the midst of those trials. So what about encouragements? We had our fair share of challenges, but what were some things personally for you that were encouraging this year?
I was encouraged by the growth I think I saw in many of the sisters that I've been walking with. Yeah, just the fact that we could be talking about the things that we're talking about now and be on the same page and desire the same things. And if I'm led in a certain direction in terms of a conviction, there were many times there were other sisters who felt the same way and would come up to me and share, oh, we have to do this, or I feel so convicted about this or that. And it's amazing to see how God is kind of moving in us where many of us are united on that front. And so I've been very thankful just to see that growth. I also love watching people get baptized. And this year we had a lot of folks get baptized. A lot of
Even yesterday, we have 5 people get baptized.
right, that's right. And just being able to see God at work in the lives of different people where they've come to a point where they make that profession of faith. And yeah, it's just amazing to see. I mean, how encouraging is that? That is like the most amazing thing that God can do is take a heart of stone and give you a new heart of flesh and then make you his own. Yeah.
We had a lot of new members this year too.
Yeah, many
Yeah.
new members as well, which is also very encouraging.
Yeah, I know there's seasons where like maybe only we'll get like 1 or 2 new members at our members meeting, but I think this year a lot of our members meeting we had like 5 to 8 people join, and I think that's encouraging, at least for me, because I know from like top down, or sometimes it's easy for churches to kind of resort to more, I guess, like what will draw people in, right? Should we put more stage lights, or should we kind of change the worship into more concert style type of thing? But I think something that encourages me is that we've just been preaching the word, and we do our fair share in terms of welcoming people and caring for people who come into the church. And
being intentional about that.
yeah, being intentional about that. We even have a ministry called Hello CGS that does events for people like that. But at the same time, what is, I guess, when people walk into our church, they know exactly what we stand for, which is the preaching of the word. And yet, the people who do join our membership, we know that they came here because they want to learn and because they want to hear more of the preaching of the word.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you. I think the centrality of the word and the growth that it brings, especially seen in the way that people serve, I think has been especially encouraging. Just give a quick shout out. I think the media team actually had to make a lot of, what do you call it? Like adjustments this year, learning the new service order. And I mean, by no means are we perfect. I think there's a lot of mistakes and ways that we can improve still, but I think just the willingness to be able to adapt and understanding that we're serving God and this is for the service of our Lord, I think has been very encouraging. And not only the media team, just the entire church. Whenever we have events, people are so willing to help out and serve. And even something as small as cleaning every Saturday. We've had our church members, our deacons, our staff members just come and help clean the church and keep the church beautiful, right? On the outside, so that people can come and not be distracted by the small things, but really for the purpose of worshiping God and focusing on that. I think it's been very encouraging to see how people have been growing in those ways too, willing to serve others and loving the church in that way.
There are also a lot of new babies too that were born.
Yeah.
And a
Many
lot of
new
upcoming
families.
babies as well.
Right.
Thank you, guys. Why don't we take a look to next year? What are you looking forward to next year?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff already in the works.
Yeah.
We have our retreats planned out. Like I mentioned before, we have our all church retreat every June and Gravitas retreats coming up, the Edify retreats being planned. So I think just a lot of different opportunities for our church to continue to grow and learn together. I think those are very exciting things, especially as we have a lot of changes that are coming. Looking for a new building. We just installed 3 new deacons and the new elder. So just even considering all those things, I think there's just so much excitement that awaits us as God, just waiting expectantly for God to continue to teach us and grow this church.
On a lighter note, I am interested to see what our church is going to get into next year in terms of like
Yeah,
activities.
we're on this like ping pong trend right now.
So this year, early on, boxing started, right?
Yeah.
Was it early? It was
last
boxing,
year, but it really took off this year.
and then we had a really long volleyball stint,
Yeah.
and then now everyone's into ping pong.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what's next? What do you think, Christine?
Soccer.
She wants the church to ice
Soccer.
skate.
It's gonna be soccer.
Nobody's gonna ice skate. People might honestly.
Ice skate.
Wait, I don't think we have that many people who play soccer though.
There's a lot of people that watch soccer.
Yeah, a lot of people watch soccer. Even just last week, we had so many people in the NPR just watching the World Cup.
Screaming.
Yeah, screaming.
Really screaming.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Honestly, there's a lot that I am looking forward to in terms of like particular events. There are many things like Chunseok said that are in the works, whether that's on a church level or even on a personal level. But I think overall, I'm just excited for a new year and to just keep on keeping on. I think that there is something really special year after year. I'm realizing as I'm getting older in just being able to do each day well. And so I'm not even, there's a lot to look forward to, but I'm actually not even looking that far ahead. I'm just trying to do my best each day. So yeah, as we roll into the new year, I'm excited that there's a new year starting, and I just want to keep doing what I'm supposed to be doing and hopefully do it well.
Any New Year's resolutions?
I think a few of us from the half marathon crew are trying to do the half marathon again, and then half of them want to run an actual marathon. I don't necessarily want to run a full marathon. I don't think I can physically do it. I think a half marathon, anyone could do it
You
if
have
they really
to.
train.
You're the leader.
No, I don't think I could do it.
Why?
I really don't think I could. I
Not
don't
with that
think
attitude.
I mean, I don't know. If I get to a place where like physically I'm healthy enough to do that, I think I would definitely attempt it. I just really doubt that I would be able to. But we are going to do the half marathon in the beginning of the year. So that is one of my quote unquote resolutions, is to stay disciplined in that running plan training. It was really good for me this past year, I think, to have that kind of routine, and I'm hoping to pick it back up in the new year. So to be physically healthier and disciplined, and also spiritually healthier and disciplined as the women read through the Bible together.
I don't really like New Year's resolutions because I feel like I always
Knew it.
fail. But maybe because I am turning 30 this year, entering into
Dang.
Oh my goodness.
my
30
30s.
June suck.
Maybe I feel like this podcast is gonna be used against me in saying this, but I do, like Christine said, I do want to continue to grow spiritually and in my knowledge of God's word. So
Mm.
I do want to read books. I think 30 books this year.
Whoa.
30 books this year.
Yeah,
But
it'd be
like what
nice.
length though?
Huh?
Like 30 crucial question books?
No, like 30 books,
That's more than
30
two
good
books a
books.
month.
Mm.
You know? Yeah,
I don't know who it was. Someone said they wanted to read a book in a week, like every week for a year.
52
And
books.
I said, brother, that's ambitious.
I'm trying to read more
I think you
too,
definitely
but-
can.
think
You just
you
have to
can,
carve out
but
time.
Yeah.
and
yeah,
have a
wow.
discipline.
That-
So,
and then also like, it depends on the kind of book you read too.
Mm.
but yes, I want to attempt to read 30 books this year. So
That's
Mm.
cool.
I think for me, so I don't know how possible this one is, but I want to be able to fast something every month, like something.
Mm.
I know it seems a little bit kind of like just see if I can do it, but I think there's definitely spiritual value to not depending on certain things. So even for this Advent, my wife and I, we were doing our best to cut out entertainment,
Mm.
social media and things like that. But I think next year maybe I'm not so great at diet like fasts or diet
Mm.
restrictions. I have a pretty bad appetite when it comes to food, and Christine knows that I'm probably the one in the office who orders out for lunch the most.
Me
She's
too.
no, you're probably worse than me, to be honest. But
I
I'm
feel
a
like
close.
the three of us here are like numbers 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, I'm
Me
a
too.
close
We
second
do
though.
eat out a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whether it's like processed sugar, I don't know, soda,
Water.
even like secular music, stuff like that.
Mhm.
I don't know. I want to try fasting something every month next
Try fasting
year.
water.
Water? I need that. Speaking of Junsuck's answer about books, was there a book that stood out to you guys this year that you read?
Mm.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Since you're so excited to share.
I loved Seasons of Sorrow by Tim Challies. It's a book he wrote. Actually, it's a collection of writings, I believe. Some are his blog posts, some were his personal entries, and then I think maybe he may have written a couple new ones for the book too. But it's his reflections on the year after his son passed away, and his son passed away a couple years ago. Young man in college. They live in Canada, but his son was in school in the U.S. somewhere. I can't remember where, but he just collapsed and passed away. It was sudden. And Tim Challies is a pastor and a writer, and he just writes so beautifully about what he went through. It's very honest, it's vulnerable, but also kind of takes you through the things that he was wrestling with, how God was just so present in his time of suffering as he was leading his family, and also just thinking about his son. And it really made me think a lot about eternity and just remembering that we are living this life, knowing that there's an eternity to come. And so I think that book really is one that I'll probably revisit again and again. But yeah, it left a deep impression on me this year.
That's very interesting because I think the book that really stood out to me this year was about death too.
Mm.
There's a book I read called "If I Should Die Before I Wake: What's Beyond This Life." This is by Scott Oliphant and Sinclair Ferguson. I think just reflecting on eternity and just even how temporal this life is. I think that book kind of stayed with me. I think there's one section that really stood out to me where the authors talk about having loss. So if we lose relationships, even if it's for very good reasons. So, for example, like let's say a member of your church ends up leaving your church, and this is the last time that you're ever going to see them, or a faithful brother passes away. I think the authors mention how, at times we may not see the reason why God takes these things away from us, but in eternity we'll understand. So, just thinking from that eternal perspective has been really um, just impactful for me this past year. Just considering what's beyond this life, and just even the contentment that comes in knowing that ultimately God is sovereign.
2.5, no, I think like 1.5 books stood out to me. The half is like a really short book. One that people might know a little bit already is It's Good to Be a Man by Michael Foster. The elders have been going over it. Gravitas will go over it, I believe. And some people have just been reading it on their own, but it basically talks about how, again, what is a biblical understanding of manhood? And it kind of poses it a little differently than masculine mandate, because it sets it up in the context of, well, this is what modern feminism has told men about how they should feel about themselves. And a lot of it's like, oh, it's not good to be a man, right? Or a man should be basically like a more feminized version of a woman's best friend or something like that, right? And so I think a lot of modern feminism had told men that, but then this book kind of reclaims what the Bible has said about even just patriarchy throughout the biblical lineage, from Abraham, to David and all these things. So that's a good one that a lot of people have been reading. And then one I read recently, and the title a little crazy, but it says How to Exasperate Your Wife. And it's satire, right? It's satire. But it's basically a bunch of collected essays about, specifically about how to be a husband. And he talks about how, what the role of the husband is. He goes very practical into, whose job is it to do the dishes, right? Whose job is it to manage the kitchen, things like that. And so I think it's a really, really short book, really good short book, and it's written by Doug Wilson.
What was your favorite podcast episode this week from the Dear Church podcast?
This week?
This week?
No, this
one.
past year. You know what I mean.
I like the Q&A with Dr. Guy Prentice Waters. That was cool. I liked the series on the Ten Commandments. I really like that series. And I also really liked the Elders.
So which one's your favorite?
I'm going to say the Elders episode, maybe because I just listened to it, so it's fresh. But I really enjoyed hearing from our elders. It was awesome. They're such awesome men. So it was cool to have them all together and hear them share and talk.
I think as someone that just sits in here every week, one of the most memorable ones for me was when we did Commandments 9 and 10, like Christine mentioned, out of the Ten Commandments series. I think as we were sitting here and just kind of going into what bearing false witness against your neighbor really means, I think it stumped me and Sam a lot, but also kind of opened our eyes to it's not as clear cut as not lying. There's different implications on what that really means to not bear false witness, and that even saying factually true statements, you can bear false witness against your neighbor. So I think that one was it wasn't exciting. It wasn't a very interesting discussion we had with Pastor Eugene.
Yeah. I think one of the most, favorite is kind of a rough one to place on. There's so many good ones, but I think the one that at least stays in my mind the most is when Roe v. Wade just got overturned. And we didn't just have one episode. We had an episode specifically on it, but then even after that, we had Q&A sessions in the next episodes. And I think that was good because, even though as a church, we completely we support and we defend the sanctity of life, there's a lot of hard questions that do come with this issue, right? There's issues like, am I an abolitionist? Am I someone who has to just, completely cut this out? Should I advocate for just the complete, abolishment of abortion? What about ectopic pregnancies? What about, anecdotal cases like rape and incest and things like that. So I think in that we saw a little bit more of like a back and forth between PUJ and the church
Yeah.
being able to address some of the things and the questions that specific members had. So I think it was good for our church.
Yeah, and I think during that time we also went through. It was very fitting because we were going through the topic of what is a man, what is a woman,
Mm.
and we saw our two non-biologists go to become 3 biologists, with Christine joining in the
That's
discussion.
true.
So
They did
we have
graduate.
episodes titled "What is a Man, What is a Man" Part 2, Roe v. Wade, What is a Woman, What is a Woman Part 2. So those are episodes 94 to 97.
Yeah, those were good. Well, thank you guys so much for joining, and have a happy new year.
We should say that thing that we always say.
We thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we have our first episode of the new year. Don't know what the topic is yet, but tune in next week to find out. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith.
Peace.